Hi, everybody. My name is Catherine Hubbard, or you probably know me as Kat, and I'm here to talk about men, sex, homosociality, which is an article written by Michael Flood that we read for this class. So I have a lot of stuff I want to say and a lot of things that I thought, so I'd like to share that with you guys. I think we should start with, regardless if we like it or not, men and women have been born into a patriarchal society. It's not something that, as a baby you give consent to. Since the start of human civilization, men have been ahead of these structural hierarchies, have been in charge, and that has just been something that we have not questioned enough or critically enough in society. However, due to that, there are a few things and criteria points that a man is supposed to fit in to be deemed manly or worthy under the eyes of society. As noted in this reading, how men feel about other men is really important in that identity. What is especially interesting about this particular article was that men put these values and opinions of their male relations ahead of that of the females in their lives, regardless of their connection to them. This research interviewed men who were involved in military college in Australia, which is understandably known as a boys' club, as most military institutions are. These military institutions, regardless of where they are in Western cultures, are institutions that promote ideals of violence, power over basic human dignities. Regardless if it's in the name of nationalism, you frequently may hear in the national interest perpetuated by those within the organization. And you can also really see it in the training that is given to recruits. As it's highlighted in this article, these themes of violence and power do contribute to various forms of sexualized violence and violence in general. This made me think of what other organizations contribute to these ideals of power, violence, and sexualization as well. Another place that I really thought, where do I see these connections is within Canadian hockey leagues. These same conversations and narratives that were discussed in this article are very easily applied to this sport. In Canada specifically, hockey players are not only treated as the everyday individual or civilian, if you will, but the sport as a whole, due to its association as part of the Canadian identity and contribution to this sense of nationalism, makes these players almost more valuable members of society. I want you guys to try to think for a minute of walking into Tim Hortons and saying that you don't like hockey, you didn't watch the World Juniors, or you don't care about the Stanley Cup. I can almost guarantee that 1, 2, 3, 4 of you in the establishment are going to look at whoever said that and think of some differently and think, that person is less Canadian. And that's harmful. Hockey promotes similar and in some cases really identical ideals of violence and power as discussed in this article by encouraging needless violence as a unit of sportsmanship and as part of the game that doesn't benefit the gameplay at all. The sport is simultaneously giving these players a form of power that exists outside of the rink and extends into various other social structures and institutions in the world. Boys as young as 16 gain this social status, which gives them a power in the world. And that is difficult to grapple with when you're already struggling with what do I need to do to be a man? What do I need to do to prove myself in these social circles? The reason that hockey is so powerful is not just because of its connection to national identity, nor is it because it's really supports and promotes these patriarchal structures, but it does definitely have a very strong link to capitalism. The money made in these major competitive leagues like the NHL is very high. According to an article that I found while preparing for this video, the NHL makes on average $25 million in profit each year, and that money is expected to rise every year. This money is not the total gross amount of the organization, it's simply their profit. Players as well make very high salaries. I want to give a little comparison here as to how, the structure that is patriarchy kind of supports the differences between males and females. Austin Matthews earned the highest salary in the NHL in 2019 at $15.91 million due to a cap that the NHL has on how much they can play each player each year, rather. And according to an article written by the CBC, Amanda Kessel is one of the highest grossing female players, and she earns in comparison $10,700 a year to play the same sport. Mind you, there are different regulations as far as your physical contact. And a great deal more people do watch men's sports, but we have to ask ourselves why. Why is this taking place? Well, the violence that is promoted within the NHL contributes to the money earned. People want to see this violence because they want to see this type of behaviors take place. Whereas the women's leagues don't promote that same type of violence and power struggle, which I think is really interesting and definitely needs to be taken into consideration. I don't want to imply here that all hockey players are violent, power-hungry men. Growing up in rural Nova Scotia, I've interacted with a lot of hockey players, as I'm sure a lot of you have had similar experiences with very kind and humble people. But it's not the majority experience that I personally have had, nor is it the experience of a majority of women that I've spoken with. I think it's important that we talk about boys growing up in this sport and given very early access to locker room talk. And this is going to contribute to those homosocial relationships and why these boys find it so empowering and so important to share these things with other men. This is definitely due partly to us living in a society that is implicitly and explicitly promoting men playing the sports to behave in such violent manners. But the result of these behaviors, in my opinion, is very closely connected with how they interact with each other and how these boys contribute together on ice and off the ice, and how their coaches and family, when you approach it and say, you know, I've heard the boys speak in this in locker room in such a manner, it was inappropriate, and how you're greeted by hostility. You know, they're athletes, they're boys, they're going to do what boys are going to do. And the reluctancy to try to correct some of these behaviors is definitely an issue. Also, I think another thing we really should be talking about as well, men in these leagues are definitely sexualized. And I don't want to give out the opinion or the idea that I think that, you know, while the article talks about men sexualizing women, that women can't sexualize men. Women definitely can be attracted to the image of an athlete. And there is, you know, a type that wants a man who's rough and tough and stereotypically adheres to gender norms. Growing up through high school, and again in rural Nova Scotia, you know, you really wanted to date the hockey player. It gave you social status equivalent to what the article discussed when men sleep with other women of higher social status or who are more attractive in order to gain like a point system, if you will. By sleeping with a hockey player, you are considered to gain that same type of status. And it's a sign of pride to be able to deem yourself what girls in my community and across the hockey communities in the country call a puck bunny. A lot of girls would carry signs into rep hockey games as depicted here. Tyler, number 19, we sucked your dick in high school. Do you remember us? Sydney, can I hold your stick? These types of narratives start very, very young, and these ideas start very, very young. Girls as early as the age of 16 were carrying these types of signs into high school and small league hockey games. Of course, these ages are going to vary, but the conversations that come with these narratives doesn't change. You know, you often saw videos circulate of players comparing their kill counts, meaning how many girls they've slept with so far, or their night count, so how many girls they were able to sleep with in the run of an evening. And due to the status of these players, because of the power and status and their image that they had, they were not given punishment, nor were they given a space to have conversations as to why this was wrong, or why there was other ways to talk about women. Men playing hockey are given a space where they're not just simply allowed to talk about women in these explicit manners, but they're encouraged through their peers to do so. And these male-to-male relationships offered them a space and where they were comfortable in having these conversations and not thinking about the impact it would have on the women that they were talking about. There is some academic research being done looking into sexualization of athletes and also sexual assaults and their connection with athletes. In a study done in 2004 called Athlete Aggression on the Rink and Off the Ice, there were a lot of connections made between hockey players and sexual assault and sexualized violence. This sport was found to have a very strong combination connection to the patriarchy and violence, and direct links to those two things influencing the amount of violence, both intimate and non-intimate. This research stated that, teammates in a lot of contact sports, but specifically hockey, really do model these sexist behaviors and are reinforced through their training, aggression, and negative attitudes, which no doubt has an impact on how they treat women. And this is not to say that men who don't play hockey can't objectify women, but you do see this happen more in these contact sports that are promoting these same types of violence, similar to how the military does. How men interact with one another seems to have an impact on how they treat women, and I don't think we could really argue that. This article, aside from being very interesting and bringing up some interesting points for me, I think my most significant takeaway was that it is important to understand how these behaviors are being taught and how they are being ingrained into these male-identifying people in our society. Why is it that men value these relationships so intently and important? Why can't a man feel the need to just hang out with a girl and not want to have sex with them? Why is it that men feel the need to talk so degradingly about women in these, locker room situations? And I think that if we start asking these questions and if we think critically about how we're teaching our young boys, then we could kind of change some of the outcomes of Flood's work. So thank you guys for listening to me. I really enjoyed this reading. I hope you guys didn't hate the sound of me talking for too long, and have a fantastic day.